Sometimes I think if my grandmother were still alive, she'd get the biggest laugh out of how all this started. Just a handful of stubborn
You are
roses
not
and
authorized to be
one
here. I
woman
want
with a
you off this
clipboard and
property
a
right
personal
now.
vendetta
You can't
against
tell me what to
anything
do.
she couldn't
I live here
control.
just like you do.
That's the
Speaking
thing
of
about
tension,
old
this is
neighborhoods, right?
entirely
You
your
buy
fault.
in thinking
My
you're getting a
fault?
slice of quiet
You
paradise,
are the one
a
who
safe
involved the
place to put
police.
down roots
Get off
and
my
maybe
property
pass
right now.
something
You have no
beautiful
right
onto
to
your
be here.
kids.
I am not going anywhere, you
But
hear me?
let me back up
That
a
is enough.
sec.
Both of you, stand down now.
If you'd told me a year ago I'd end up fighting for my life, my actual literal freedom over a bunch of flowers, I would have called you crazy. Turns out crazy is just another word for Tuesday around here. My name's David Miller, freelance designer, third generation on Oak Street, and as of this morning, public enemy number one to the Greenwood Homeowners Association, or as my wife Linda calls it, the Ministry of Neighborhood Nonsense. Linda's a first grade teacher, the kind of person who bakes cookies for neighbors, joins PTA meetings, thinks the best of everyone at least until proven otherwise. Me, I keep to myself, mind my garden, pay my taxes, mow my lawn, and I was never much for drama until it found me. It started with a voice, hers, floating over my fence like a mosquito you can't quite swat. Remove those roses or I'm calling the police. I looked up, hands still wet from the watering can, and there she was, a woman I'd never seen before, standing at my gate like she owned every inch of land her shadow touched. "You're going to call the cops on flowers," I said, half laughing. She didn't. She pulled out her phone, dialed faster than a teenager on TikTok, and her voice dropped to a practiced chill. "Officer Williams, we have a non-compliant homeowner refusing HOA orders." I swear my blood ran cold right there in broad daylight. She wasn't bluffing either. 20 minutes later, I was in handcuffs on my own lawn, my neighbors gawking from behind curtains, and all I could think was, this can't be happening. All because I refused to destroy my grandmother's garden. But that was just the first act. Let me back up. See, my grandmother planted those roses back in '87, long before anybody had heard the phrase Homeowners Association. She'd clipped photos from gardening magazines, saved receipts, kept meticulous records. God bless her, she was the original spreadsheet. These weren't just any roses either. They were heirlooms, names you don't find at Home Depot anymore. Queen Elizabeth, Mr. Lincoln Damask, Red Blush, Peach, each with its own story. To me, that garden was memory and heritage and hope, all tangled up in thorns and sunlight. So when Karen White showed up that morning, clipboard navy blazer, hair so tight it looked like it hurt, I just figured she was a lost realtor or maybe someone from the city. But no, she was the new HOA president, and she moved like someone who'd been waiting her whole life to enforce rules. She took photos of everything, Rose's mailbox, even my shoes for all I know. Every movement was methodical, precise, like she was logging evidence for a trial I didn't know I was standing in. "Mr. Miller, I presume?" She flashed a smile so fake it could have been store-bought. "Karen White, president of the Greenwood Homeowners Association. We need to discuss some violations." She clicked her pen, checked her phone, sent a quick text. The screen lit up. He refused. "Proceed to phase 2. She handed me a fat packet of papers, every code violation already filled out, and her tone went from syrup to razor wire in 2 seconds flat. "Your rose garden violates 7 specific HOA codes. Height exceeds regulations by 3 inches. Varieties aren't on our approved botanical list. Fence encroaches by precisely 2.5 inches. I just stood there, watering can heavy in my hand, feeling the weight of a life's work turned into a list of crimes. "These roses were planted in 1987, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've got the documentation. They were here before the HOA was even a thing." But she just smiled, made some dramatic note on her clipboard, and said, "Grandfathering privileges were revoked in 2019 during our Community Enhancement Initiative. All residents voted. The vote was unanimous." I could tell she'd said that line before, probably practiced in front of the mirror, just waiting to use it on some unsuspecting homeowner. I never received notice of any meeting. I replied, my anger starting to boil. "In fact, I never even knew we had an HOA until you showed up." And that's when I saw it. The glint in her eyes, the thrill of a predator who just found easy prey. Proper notices were sent via certified mail to all residents, she said, her pen scratching like fingernails on a chalkboard. Perhaps you should check with the Postal Service about delivery issues. Her threat was bureaucratic, but it was a threat all the same. Remove the garden or face escalating financial consequences, she said, and if I refuse, the street went quiet like even the birds were holding their breath. She flashed that predatory smile again. Most people change their minds when they understand the full situation and all available enforcement mechanisms. That's when I noticed the police cruiser parked at the corner, not patrolling, just sitting there, watching. I will never destroy my grandmother's garden, I said. And each word was a brick in a wall I wasn't planning to move. Not for her, not for any HOA, not for anyone. She just gathered her things and left. But before she got in her car, she called over her shoulder, "You have 48 hours to reconsider. I suggest you use them wisely to consult with your wife." And then she was gone, but the cruiser stayed, and suddenly my paradise felt like enemy territory. That night, Linda and I sat on the old garden bench, the air thick with jasmine and tension. I told her everything, watched her face shift from disbelief to concern. "Maybe we should just comply," she whispered. "Always the peacemaker, always looking for a way to make things right. We can plant new flowers, ones that fit their list." But I could see in her eyes she knew it wouldn't stop there. The next morning, a thick envelope appeared in our mailbox. Final warning, remove violations, or face legal action, signed by Karen and Officer Williams, community liaison. It even had the police department seal, badge number, the whole deal. Linda went pale as she read it. "Since when do police get involved in HOA disputes?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer. The police arrived at dawn, 3 cruisers' lights flashing turned our quiet street into a scene from some bad TV drama. Officer Williams, all swagger and mustache, announced wellness check. His backup fanned out across our lawn, acting like I was harboring a fugitive instead of watering roses. "Mrs. White reported concerning behavior," he said. "We need to ensure community safety." Behind him, Linda hugged her coffee mug, eyes wide with fear. Officers were walking around inspecting my grandmother's roses like they were searching for contraband. Karen's voice piped in through William's speakerphone. She was video calling, directing the whole scene like a movie set. "Thank you for responding so quickly to my concerns," she said, and Williams replied, "Same situation as the Collins incident." That phrase hit me like a hammer. There had been others, other families, other gardens, other refusals. This wasn't her first time weaponizing the police. The next 72 hours were a blur. Social media exploded. Police called to Oak Street. Neighbor refuses community rules. Every post sounded the same, suspiciously similar. Karen's fingerprints were all over it. By noon, the notices started arriving. Mailbox angle, wrong grass, half an inch too tall, car parked at a bad angle. Fines stacked up like a losing hand in poker, each one nastier than the last. Linda came home shaken, parents asking for their kids to be moved out of her class, principal questioning her domestic situation. Neighbors started avoiding us. Becky Jackson, who'd been our friend, suddenly had somewhere else to be whenever she saw us. Mrs. Anderson, always so friendly, now hustled past our yard like we were contagious. That evening, Walter Thompson showed up at our back fence. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "Son, you don't understand who you're fighting here," he said, slipping me a manila folder. Inside, evidence, newspaper clippings, notes, 8 families in 3 years forced to sell after refusing HOA demands. "They threatened me too," he said, voice shaking. "Told me elderly residents have accidents when they interfere." Back inside, Linda and I spread out the documents. Every family had followed the same pattern: violation, notice, fines, police intervention, trumped-up criminal charges, forced sale. And every time the same real estate company bought the property at a huge discount. That company was tied to Robert White, Karen's husband. My phone buzzed. "Unknown number. You're not alone. Keep fighting. Evidence is being gathered." It flashed and vanished almost before I could read it. That night, another notice: mandatory attendance at a code enforcement hearing, signed by Officer Williams. The phone number connected directly to him, not any official city office. Linda read the letter, hands trembling. They're not even pretending this is legal anymore, she whispered, looking out at the ever-present police cruiser. We fight, I said, but we're smart about it. Karen doesn't know about Walter's evidence or whoever's behind that text. She nodded, though I could see the fear. What if they arrest you? What if they plant evidence like they did with the Collins boy? I squeezed her hand. Then we make sure the world knows what happened. Karen's operation works because people stay isolated. That ends now. Through the window, I saw a van parked across the street, not watching us, but the cruiser. Whatever was happening, we weren't the only ones watching anymore. That night, Linda looked at
You
the
are not
roses, the old
authorized to be
bench.
here. I want you off
Your
this
grandmother
property
would be
right
proud,
now.
she whispered.
You can't tell me what to do.
And as darkness
I live
fell,
here
I
just
knew
like
some
you do.
things were worth fighting
Speaking
for
of tension,
even when the
this is
cost kept
entirely
rising.
your fault.
My
Morning
fault?
came like a punch to the gut,
You are the
cloudy,
one who
thick,
involved
humming
the
with the
police.
tension that never
Get
really
off my
left our
property
house
right
anymore.
now. You have no right to be here.
The hearing
I am
at the
not going
community
anywhere,
center
you
wasn't
hear me?
just a meeting,
That
it
is
was a
enough.
circus
Both
with
of you,
one
stand
ringmaster,
down now.
Karen. I walked in with Linda, my heart pounding, the folder of my grandmother's records clutched in my hand. It was just the two of us. Everyone else either sitting on Karen's side of the room or avoiding eye contact altogether. Inside, Harold Peterson presided from behind a folding table draped with an American flag black robe and all pretending to be a judge. The irony didn't escape me, a man who probably couldn't pass a bar exam running a kangaroo court to decide the fate of a rose garden. Karen sat beside him, navy suit pressed, sharp manila folders, stacked clipboard ready, her whole army of evidence at the ready. The gallery was filled with neighbors, people we used to wave to on Saturdays, folks who'd borrowed our ladder or joined our block parties. But today they sat stiff eyes forward as if looking at me might draw fire. Peterson started with a flourish, banging a wooden gavel like it actually meant something. Mr. Miller, you stand accused of willful violation of community standards, destruction of property values, and defiance of lawfully constituted authority. How do you plead? All that for a flower bed, imagine. Not guilty, I said, but I could see in his eyes he'd already written the verdict. Karen stood oozing confidence. Your Honor, Mr. Miller's flagrant disregard for community standards threatens property values and the aesthetic integrity of our neighborhood. His illegal garden, unauthorized varieties, visual blight, aggressive behavior, he's threatened retaliation against those supporting enforcement. She waved blown-up photos of my roses, somehow making them look wild and sinister instead of beautiful. Mrs. Henderson, nervous as a cat, testified first, claiming my aggressive gardening had damaged her fence, that I'd been hostile about community concerns. The pause before incidents was just long enough to smell the rehearsed script. Tom Bradley chimed in thorns from his roses, scratched my car. He's been confrontational. Becky Jackson, whose kids used to play in our yard, sat there and said, he's unstable. I see him late at night in the garden talking to himself. My kids are afraid. Her voice shook, but she didn't look at me. And for a moment I started to doubt my own memory. Was I really losing it? When my turn came, I held up my grandmother's records, the photos, the original sales receipts, city gardening newsletters. These roses were planted in 1987, 15 years before any HOA existed here. Peterson's gavel cut me off. Irrelevant. Current community standards supersede historical precedent. The question is compliance with existing regulations, not archaeological gardening claims. He didn't want evidence, he wanted obedience. The verdict came down hard. $5,000 in fines, 72 hours to remove the roses or face enhanced enforcement. Outside neighbors scattered like leaves in a storm. Linda's principal had come to watch, sitting in the back, worry on her face. Walter Thompson appeared at my side as everyone was leaving, eyes darting, voice low. They came to my house last night, told me old folks can have accidents if they interfere. Here. He pressed another envelope into my hand, then vanished into the parking lot. Inside was a building permit signed by Inspector Collins, authorizing emergency demolition of my garden for supposed soil contamination. That afternoon, the pressure campaign shifted into overdrive. My biggest client called, said they needed to pause our contract until your legal matters are resolved. The bank sent a mortgage review notice. Even our internet provider started threatening to suspend our account for community complaints. Linda came home early, face-drawn, eyes red. Parents are pulling their kids from my class. The principal wants me to take a leave until this stabilizes. She finally broke down, crying over the kitchen table. Maybe we should just sell David. Just start over somewhere else where people don't know our names. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. That same unknown number. Don't sign anything. Don't remove flowers. Help is coming tomorrow. Attached was a photo Officer Williams accepting a fat envelope from Karen behind the community center. The look on his face made my stomach turn. That evening, as the sun bled out behind the rooftops, another official car rolled into our driveway. This one had city plates and a real inspector's seal on the door. Out stepped a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a toolkit. Mr. Miller, Patricia Johnson, City Building Department. I'm here for a real inspection. She spent 20 minutes in the garden, tape measure in hand, flipping through the city code on her iPad. When she finished, she looked me straight in the eye. No violations here. Somebody filed a false report. Whoever did this is either lying or never saw your property. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. Then her phone rang. I watched her expression change from confidence to defeat. Inspector Johnson speaking. Yes, Chief Morrison. Effective immediately. Yes, sir. She hung up, shook her head. I'm being transferred to another district. I can't help you anymore. Before she left, she rolled down her window. Check your mailbox tonight. Sometimes transfer orders come with extra paperwork. There was a card behind the flag, her business card, handwritten, real inspector's work nights, too. The roses rustled in the dark, whispering encouragement I could almost hear. My grandmother's voice. Deep roots are the hardest to kill, David. The next evening, I was out watering the garden, trying to find peace in the simple act of tending something beautiful, when sirens shattered the silence. 4 police cars lit up the street. Officer Williams emerged, radio crackling, swaggering up the drive. David Miller, you're under arrest for harassment, stalking, and making terroristic threats against Mrs. Karen White. I barely heard the words, but I felt the metal snap of handcuffs, the cold squeeze on my wrists. Linda ran out. He hasn't done anything wrong, but the officers ignored her. Karen stepped from her white sedan, dressed in black eyes, rimmed with fake tears, clutching a thick folder of evidence. Thank God you're here, she told the officers. I was so afraid he might escalate. She showed William screenshots of emails, printed text messages, most I'd never seen in my life. He threatened to burn my house down, to destroy everything I've built. Williams read them out loud, voice booming for the crowd gathering on the curb. These are definitely threatening communications, ma'am. He started to read my Miranda rights, but never finished, too busy performing for the neighborhood audience. Linda screamed as they stuffed me into the patrol car. This is insane. My husband never threatened anyone. But her words disappeared into the sea of murmurs, the neighborly gasps, and Karen's carefully orchestrated show. Jail is nothing like on TV, just fluorescent lights, the stench of bleach, and fear-cold metal benches. My cellmates stared at me bemused when I explained my crime. Nobody gets locked up for talking trash about roses unless someone wants you gone, the shoplifter said, shaking his head. Bail was set at $50,000. Even my lawyer looked embarrassed reading the charges. Don't say a word, she warned. This stinks of a setup. From the visitor's room, I could see Linda's face behind the glass, exhausted, afraid. They're reviewing our mortgage. I'm on unpaid leave. I don't know how much longer we can hold out. That night, the news ran a story painting me as a dangerous extremist who'd terrorized a dedicated public servant. They showed Karen in front of her house surrounded by sympathetic neighbors. I never thought it would come to this, she said, her voice cracking. I just wanted him to follow the rules. In the background, Becky Jackson and Mrs. Henderson talked about how scared they'd been of my erratic behavior. They played slow-motion shots of my rose's dark music underscoring the danger. Overnight, the narrative hardened. I was a threat. Karen was a martyr. Anyone who questioned the story was supporting domestic terrorism. But at 3 a.m., a guard shook my cot. Miller, you made bail. I blinked. Who paid? The guard shrugged. Anonymous donor. Through a bondsman. Linda was waiting white-knuckled on the steering wheel, eyes bloodshot. Someone posted your bail. The bondsman said the donor wanted to stay anonymous. On our windshield, an envelope, expensive paper, one sentence. Your grandmother's roses. They think they've won. They're wrong. Meet me at the library 3 p.m., law enforcement ethics section. Come alone. Who the hell is... Arlinda whispered as we drove home, the patrol car still parked on our street, headlights off, engine running, and behind Mrs. Anderson's hedge another car, dark engine idling. All that trouble for flowers. But someone was watching the watchers now, and the war wasn't over, not by a long shot. The library never thought I'd be the kind of person ducking into the law enforcement ethics section like some spy in a paperback thriller. But after what I'd just lived through, nothing felt normal anymore. It was quiet in there, just sunbeams, dust, that slow hush you only get in public spaces where people still believe in rules. I was early, hands sweaty, heart rattling around in my chest like a loose bolt. All I could think was, roses got me here. What are they about to get me into
You
next?
are not authorized
At 3
to be
sharp,
here. I
a
want
man
you
in his
off this
40s
property
slipped
right
around the
now.
shelves,
You
khakis,
can't
ball
tell me
cap,
what to do.
a nervous
I live
glance
here just
over
like
his
you
shoulder
do.
every few seconds.
Speaking of tension, this is
He looked like a
entirely
dad
your
at Little
fault.
League.
My
Except
fault?
for the way he gripped a thick
You
manila
are the one who
envelope,
involved the
knuckles
police.
white. You
Get
don't
off
know
my
me.
property right now.
He
You have
started,
no right
voice
to be
rough
here.
but
I am
steady.
not going anywhere.
But I
you
know
hear me?
Karen's
That is
operation
enough.
inside
Both
and
of you,
out.
stand down
He
now.
sat across from me, careful to keep his face turned from the cameras. Name's not important. What matters is in here. He slid the envelope between us. Inside, bank records, email printouts, surveillance photos. 8 months of evidence. Every family she's targeted. Every kickback, every bribe. He showed me monthly $2,000 payments from the Greenwood Community Enhancement Fund to Officer Brad Williams like clockwork. Karen's careful. She won't confess outright. But she can't help bragging once she thinks she's safe. Pride's her Achilles heel. He pointed out texts where Karen coordinated with contractors, faking violations, orchestrating enforcement using the HOA like her own private mafia. He'd even documented the Collins case, the teenage boy who'd been railroaded with planted evidence. She's going to want a deal, my ally said. She'll offer to drop charges, maybe reduce fines if you sell and leave quietly. You need to call her, set up a meeting to surrender, but we'll record everything. Get her bragging about how she pulled it off. But what if she clams up? I asked, fear prickling the back of my neck. What if she brings a lawyer and just sticks to business? He shrugged, but his eyes were sharp. Doesn't matter. We've got a financial paper trail strong enough to bury her. The recording is just icing. But you mentioned the Collins family. She won't be able to resist showing off. As he packed up, his phone buzzed. The screen flashed a text from Karen. Where are you? Dinner's getting cold. The realization slammed into me. This wasn't just some disgruntled resident. Who are you? I blurted. He hesitated, then smiled sadly. Someone who's lived with a monster for 8 years. Someone who finally realized loyalty doesn't mean covering up crimes. Call her tonight, he said. Tell her you want to discuss selling. She'll be too excited to see the trap coming. I left the library feeling like I'd been handed the keys to a bomb shelter in a hurricane, maybe safe, maybe not, but at least not alone. That night with Linda at my side, I called Karen. My hands shook. You win, Karen. I want to discuss selling the house. This has gone too far. Her voice was warm, almost motherly with triumph. Smart choice, David. Tomorrow at 2, your place. And bring Linda. I want her to hear it for herself. After I hung up, Linda squeezed my shoulder. Are you sure? She whispered. What if something goes wrong? I nodded. We do what we can. But Karen's only powerful because people fight her alone. Tomorrow we end that. Through the blinds, I saw the mysterious sedan parked across the street, our unknown ally keeping watch. One police cruiser, one unmarked car, and us smack in the middle of it all. The roses outside glowed red in the porch light, stubborn, proud, undefeated. The next day, Karen arrived at 2 sharp, trailed by her attorney, Michael Stevens, and a third man, Inspector Jim Barnes, the so-called city official who'd rubber-stamped every bogus violation. No more pageantry, no smirks, just that same iron certainty like she'd never lost a battle and didn't expect to start now. Stevens took the lead, smooth and chilly. My client is here to discuss terms of property acquisition. We will not discuss prior disputes or other residents. Any attempt to do so will terminate negotiations. He placed his briefcase on the table with a thud. Karen barely spoke at first, sticking to scripts, parroting lines about community improvement and compliance. When I tried to nudge toward the Collins family, Stephen shut me down fast. Not relevant. Stick to your case. But pride is a funny thing, you know. I waited for the right moment, voice flat defeated. I heard the Collins family had issues before they left. How did you resolve it so fast? Karen's eyes lit up for a split second before Stevens glared at her. We handled the Collins situation through appropriate channels. She said a little too smug. Documentation was thorough, overseen by proper authorities. That little slip was all it took. Stevens went pale. Karen, that's enough. Linda pressed, gently but relentless. You said you documented everything. That sounds like personal involvement, not just hearing about it after the fact. Karen fumbled for a cover, tried to say it was all community knowledge, but the damage was done. Right then, I called out the open window. Officer Williams was leaning against his patrol car, thinking he was just on security detail. Officer, you handled the Collins case, right? Karen was just explaining how well it went. Williams swaggered over, not a care in the world. Yeah, solid arrest, found the stash, right where Mrs. White said it'd be. And then his face caught up with his mouth, eyes wide with horror. And that's when the kitchen door swung open. My mysterious ally stepped inside, took off his ball cap, and Karen went white as a sheet. Robert, she gasped, her briefcase tumbling open. You set this up! Robert White, Karen's own husband, the secret witness. The inside man looked her in the eye. Voice cold as winter. You confirmed everything I've been documenting for 8 months, Karen. Collins's son never used drugs. You knew where the evidence would be because you put it there. Suddenly, the kitchen filled with more people. Detective Rebecca Davis badge, glinting, face set like stone. Inspector Patricia Johnson close behind. Mrs. White, you're under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, and tampering with evidence. Davis read her rights as Karen's whole world collapsed. Stevens spluttered about entrapment, illegal recording, but Detective Davis just clicked her recorder. One-party consent. She admitted to evidence planting, and Mr. White's documents back it all up. Officer Williams, come with us. Karen didn't scream, didn't cry. She just stood there, eyes burning with hate for her husband, whispering, "You're a traitor. You did this." Robert shrugged shoulders, slumping with the weight of 8 years' guilt. Detective Davis took Karen away, but not before Robert handed her a safety deposit key. She kept trophies, documents, pictures, souvenirs from every family she destroyed. Karen's face lost the last of its color. You wouldn't, she whispered, but Davis held up a search warrant. Already did. 47 families worth of evidence. As the door closed, I looked through the window. The roses outside my grandmother's were shining in the afternoon light, as if the sun itself was finally on our side. For the first time in months, I felt hope, real and solid, rooting down into my bones. But this fight wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the news had already started to spread, first a ripple, then a tidal wave. Karen White, president of the Greenwood HOA, arrested on a laundry list of charges: police corruption, city inspector fraud, conspiracy, racketeering, the kind of stuff you read about in big city exposés, not sleepy suburban neighborhoods. But there it was, splashed across the morning news, and I was living in the epicenter. At dawn, the street filled with official vehicles for the first time in months, real ones this time. Black SUVs with the state seal city inspectors, financial crimes units, people with badges who actually worked for the government, not just pretending. Inspector Patricia Johnson led the charge, now back in her old job and walking tall, the city's answer to every fake notice, every bogus fine. Robert White, no longer in the shadows, his hands shaking but head high, laid out everything on our kitchen table, forged HOA incorporation papers, signatures faked, state filing fees, pocketed 4 years of assessments and fines, every dollar traced back to Karen and her circle. This HOA doesn't legally exist. he said, voice breaking with shame and relief. "It's been a criminal enterprise from the very first meeting." The inspectors spread out across the neighborhood, seizing boxes of paperwork, computers, and bank records. Every enforcement mechanism Karen had ever used was now evidence for the state. By 9 o'clock, Patricia Johnson stood on the steps of the community center and made the announcement the whole neighborhood needed to hear. "By the authority of the state of California, the Greenwood Homeowners Association is hereby dissolved effective immediately. All fines, all liens, all threats are null and void. You're free." The shock was real. People stepped outside, blinking, then cheering. Some wept. Some just stood in their robes, clutching coffee mugs and wondering how they'd survived living in fear for so long. And as word spread, vindication swept through Oak Street like a spring breeze. Inspector Williams, from Financial Crimes, read out the tally: over $380,000 stolen in fake assessments, 3 shell companies, a network of phony contractors, and emergency repairs that never happened. Every dollar, every invoice, every forced sale traced to Karen's playbook. Bank accounts were frozen, assets seized. "You were all victims," Inspector Johnson told the crowd. "Not just of a fake HOA, but of organized crime." Neighbors flocked to our garden that afternoon, some apologizing for their silence, some just crying. Becky Jackson hugged Linda, her words stumbling out. "I'm so sorry. I should have stood by you. I was just so scared. Karen made me think you
You are
were
not
the problem."
authorized to be here.
And there
I
were
want you
more.
off this
Mrs.
property
Anderson,
right
Tom
now.
Bradley, even old
can't
Mr.
tell me what to
Thompson,
do.
beaming through
I live
tears,
here
saying,
just like you do.
"Son,
Speaking of tension,
you saved
this is
us all. You stood
entirely
up when
your
nobody else
fault.
could."
My
Media
fault?
vans arrived next.
You are the
Reporters
one who
crowded the
involved the
sidewalk,
police.
broadcasting
Get
the
off my
fall of the
property
biggest
right now.
HOA
You have no
scam the
right to be
county
here.
had
I
ever
am not
seen.
going anywhere, you hear me?
City inspectors
enough.
shut down
Both of you,
fraudulent
stand down
HOA
now.
became the headline. Becky, racked by guilt, started a support group for families who'd been bullied by fake HOAs, using our story as a warning and a lesson. That night we finally slept. I mean, really slept. No patrol cars, no anxiety, just the sweet smell of roses through the window, the same flowers that started the war, and now stood as proof that sometimes you have to dig in and fight, even if it costs you everything. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. All violation notices vanished from property records. Restitution funds from Karen's seized assets started flowing back. Every family compensated for their losses, plus interest. Legal protections were put in place so no HOA could operate in secret again. My grandmother's roses, the catalyst for all this, were officially protected as a historic landmark. You couldn't bulldoze them now if you tried. Karen's network collapsed overnight. Officer Williams, fake Inspector Barnes, even Judge Peterson, who'd run those sham hearings, they were all arrested. Bribes, kickbacks, falsified reports, intimidation. It turned out Karen had built an empire of fear and fraud, and the only thing propping it up was the silence of scared neighbors. Once that cracked, the whole thing fell apart. Karen herself went to trial in a packed federal courtroom. Judge Maria Santos presided, her words echoing off marble walls. "You weaponize community against innocent families. Your punishment must reflect not just the scale of your crimes, but the trust you betrayed. 10 years, no chance of parole, and everything she'd taken, money, property, reputation, gone. Williams got 5 years, Barnes got 7, Peterson 3 for his part. Robert, by turning state's witness and providing the paper trail, earned not just his freedom, but a second chance at dignity." And you know what? That's not the end. 6 months later, I stood in Karen's old yard, now the new community garden. Where she'd once ruled with a clipboard, children dug in the dirt planting seeds. Neighbors shared tomatoes and sunflowers and the latest gossip. Linda went back to teaching her name, now a badge of honor. Parents asked for their kids to be placed in her class. "We want them to learn from someone who stood up for what's right," they said. Robert married Detective Rebecca Davis, the officer who'd helped bust Karen's ring. Together, they led the state's new HOA oversight program, making sure what happened here could never happen anywhere else. Walter Thompson became something of a legend, teaching workshops on record keeping and how to spot HOA fraud. 40 years I watched and worried, he told a local reporter, but watching and documenting is how you win. And then there was the law, David's Law. They called it statewide HOA transparency, required audits, criminal penalties for fake associations. The governor signed it in our rose garden, the same place where this battle had started. It was on TV. You could see my grandmother's roses in the background, a living symbol of how beauty, when it digs in, can outlast even the most determined attack. The old fear was gone. Property values rose not because of manufactured scarcity or threats, but because people wanted to live in a place where neighbors looked out for each other. The annual Community Justice Day drew people from all over, families who'd fought their own battles against fraud, kids who learned that standing up matters, that telling the truth and keeping records can save more than just your home. Some scars took longer to heal. Becky Jackson dedicated herself to helping HOA victims, haunted by how close she'd come to letting Karen win. Mrs. Anderson became the unofficial peacemaker, settling disputes with common sense and compassion, not threats and fines. Every weekend, neighbors showed up to weed and prune the roses, kids learning their names, their stories, the lesson that beauty is worth fighting for. And Linda, she started teaching new units, civic engagement, community organizing, questioning authority. Your fight saved all of us, one parent told her. That's the lesson I want my kids to learn. The neighborhood changed forever, but for the better. People talked to each other, helped each other. The threat of silence, of isolation that was gone. The roses bloomed every spring, a little wilder, a little brighter. And every year on the anniversary, the community gathered in the garden. No more clipboards, no more threats, just laughter, stories, hope. You know, my grandmother used to say the deepest roots are the hardest to pull up. She was right. But she never could have known her roses would be what finally exposed a criminal empire, would unite a whole street, and help change the law. Now sometimes, on quiet nights, I sit out on the old garden bench, Linda's hand in mine, listening to the wind in the leaves, the laughter of kids in the new community garden, the steady pulse of life returning to the place we almost lost. I look at those roses and remember some battles choose you. And when they do, you dig in, you don't give up, and you never ever let fear decide your future. Yeah, that happened. And I'll tell you what, if you ever find yourself up against a clipboard and a bad heart, don't back down. You never know what you might uncover or how many people you might save. Funny thing is, it all started with flowers. And it ended with a whole community learning that you don't need fake authority to make a neighborhood work. You just need good people, a little courage, and maybe, just maybe, some stubborn old roses. You ever notice how the stories that start with something small, like a rose bush or a nosy neighbor with too much time, end up changing everything for everybody? It's been a year now, maybe a little more, since Karen White was led away in handcuffs, and I still wake up some mornings half expecting to see that white sedan idling at the curb, waiting to ruin another day. But instead, I hear the sound of children laughing, neighbors calling out greetings, and Linda humming to herself in the kitchen while she grades papers. The fear that heaviness, it's gone now, replaced by something like pride and maybe a little wonder. Truth is, I never set out to be a hero or a martyr for anybody. I just didn't want to rip up my grandmother's roses. But standing up for those flowers, it was like pulling a thread and unraveling a whole crooked tapestry that had been choking this place for years. Funny how something beautiful can draw out all the ugliness that's been festering just below the surface. The neighborhood itself looks different now. The lawns are a little wilder. People plant what they want, not just what's on some approved list. You see sunflowers, wild herbs, a few tomato vines trailing across fences. The old sense of fear has been replaced by cautious optimism, and I swear the air even smells sweeter. Walter Thompson, bless him, became something of a local celebrity. The city invited him to give talks at town meetings, even a spot on a consumer protection advisory board. Just keep good notes, he tells folks. You never know when you'll need a paper trail. There's a sort of dignity in that, a lesson that's spreading slow but steady, far beyond Oak Street. Linda's school brought in her story as a civics lesson. She stood in front of her class, told the kids about standing up for what's right even when it's hard. Parents from all over the district called asking if their kids could be placed in her class. Her principal, the same man who'd once asked if she needed a leave of absence, now consults her on everything from bullying to curriculum changes. And Linda, she just shrugs and says it's not about being brave, it's about doing what's right even when nobody else will. Robert White, for all his flaws, found a kind of redemption. He worked hand in hand with city investigators, testifying in court, tracing the stolen money, exposing every fake signature. There were nights he'd stop by, sit on our bench, hands shaking, just needing to talk. You don't realize what you're living in until you open the windows and let the stink out, he told me once, looking at his own shadow on the grass. After the divorce, he remarried Detective Davis, the internal affairs officer who busted the case wide open. They moved out of state, started fresh, using their experience to help root out corruption in other communities. And then there was Becky Jackson. Her guilt drove her to activism. She started a hotline for HOA abuse victims, a Facebook group that ballooned from a dozen to thousands. I'd see her at the garden handing out coffee, listening to people's stories, sometimes crying right along with them. She made it her mission to make sure what happened here never happened anywhere else. My grandmother's roses, those stubborn, blood-red miracles, became something of a local landmark. Folks drive in from other neighborhoods just to take pictures, ask about their history. The city even put up a plaque, Monroe Heritage Garden, symbol of community and resistance. On sunny weekends, families gather sharing food and laughter, planting new beds, daisies, peonies, lavender, each with their own story, their own roots. The local government invited me to speak at the city council meeting where David's Law passed. I told them the truth. I didn't do anything special. I just refused to back down. If you want good neighborhoods, you need transparency. You need watchdogs, not lapdogs. The law now requires open financial records for every HOA in the state, regular outside audits, criminal penalties for fraud or intimidation. And maybe the best part, mandatory annual meetings open to the public where real people can ask real questions. Every so often a new family moves in, worried, asking if it's safe here. I show them around, introduce them to Mrs. Anderson and Tom Bradley, walk them through the community garden, let their kids pick a rose or two. I tell them, it's safe now because we all learned how to speak up. And they nod, sometimes teary-eyed, and you can see the relief spread over their faces like dawn breaking. But I'd be lying if I said there weren't scars. Some folks still look over their shoulders, still half expect the next Karen to pop up with a new scam or a clipboard full of threats. There are nights when Linda wakes from a bad dream, or I find myself double-checking the mailbox, making sure no more official-looking envelopes are waiting. Trauma like that doesn't fade quick. Yet the trust is coming back, one block party, one shared tomato, one hard-won laugh at a time. Sometimes late at night I walk the yard, feeling the cool earth under my feet, smelling the roses and the hint of hope that lives in their petals. I think about my grandmother, how she'd sit right here, fingers in the dirt, humming old songs. I like to believe she's looking down proud, not just because her roses survived, but because a whole community learned how to bloom again. She'd probably laugh, shake her head and say, "Told you those roots run deep, David." And she'd be right. A new chapter. If there's one thing I learned, it's that you can't ever count out ordinary people when you threaten what they love. You can scare folks for a while, freeze their bank accounts, threaten their jobs, whisper behind their backs, but sooner or later someone stands up and then another and then a dozen, and that's when everything changes. It happened here. It can happen anywhere. Our fight didn't just save a few flowers. It saved families' homes and the very soul of our community. It changed laws, changed hearts, and maybe just maybe made the world a little bit better, one stubborn rose at a time. If you're out there dealing with your own Karen or someone trying to run your life from behind a desk, don't give up. Keep your records, find your allies, and remember that truth is a stubborn thing. It always finds its way through in the end, even if it has to push up through concrete. So here's to every neighbor who's ever felt powerless, every teacher who stood up for her students, every old-timer with a folder full of receipts, and every quiet hero who says, "Not today." Here's to the gardens, the stories, the laughter that survives the storm. Here's to hope. And if you ever need advice about roses or how to take down a fake HOA, you know where to find me. The bench is always open.